My name is Sara Smith-Silverman. I'm a professor of history at American River College, and today's date is October 10th, 2023. So let's start off by establishing the basics. What's your full name? What are your pronouns? And what's your date of birth?
My full name is Francisco Valier. My pronouns are he, they, and was born on December 10th, 2001, so I'll be 22 in 2 months exactly.
So tell me a little about yourself. What are your interests and hobbies? What do you like to do?
I am an only child of two parents. They had me later in life, and I go to ARC primarily. I've gone to Sac City for one semester. I'm now doing 8 week course at CRC through a synchronous class. Uh, I grew up speaking Spanish, but after I started learning English a lot, I my Spanish went away, so I'm slowly trying to regain it. Yeah, and then I like to listen to music, make playlists sometimes. Um, I love to travel if I ever can, and I also like to spend time with my boyfriend, my pets, his pets, or his roommate's dog. She's very cute. And just like to even be with my boyfriend, like just for not even interacting with each other, just being in the same room, just being with him. And all that.
Anything else you want to say about your interests and hobbies and things that you like to do?
Mm, I with music, it's in my family a lot. I tried to badly play the flute younger. Apparently the clarinet is famous in my family, and I did not even know that when I signed up for flute. And I was in choir, but now since transitioning, I have not really sang a whole lot, so my voice has changed.
So, where did you grow up and where do you live now?
I grew up in Woodland, and I live now in Sacramento. I was actually born in Sacramento, but raised in Woodland. And until I moved here, I was like, I did not know anything about Sacramento besides just being born here. Woodland is a small town, primarily Hispanic. It's not too far from here. But yeah, I just grew up in like that small town area thing, little bubble ish.
So, where do you currently attend college and what do you study?
I mainly attend at American River College, and am studying sociology.
How long have you been at ARC?
3 years now.
Are you part time or full time?
I'm almost done at ARC, so I'm part time now. I've been full time the past year or so. When I first started at ARC, that's when COVID hit, so I was taking everything by little steps because I knew before I was not good with online education. So, like, I will try to do this, but I'm gonna do it my way.
And why did you decide to study sociology? What interests you about sociology?
At first, I didn't really know much about sociology and I never really heard of it. I have always been interested in history. I've always loved it. And I've always like been interested in different cultures, languages, stuff like that. So that's kind of how I got to sociology through like my love of history, language, and culture, and then like furthermore learning about it and what you could possibly do with a sociology degree.
So, what are you hoping to do with it?
I'm not 100% sure, but I might continue on the little family tradition of being a teacher. If I do that, I would be third gen, especially if I do elementary.
You like teaching kids?
Yeah, and I've always been good with kids, even since I was little, ironically. I don't know how that happened, but it just did.
Okay, can you talk some about how you identify with regard to your social identities, broadly speaking? So, race and ethnicity, sexuality, gender, disability, religion, and so on?
So, with race, I identify as white, Hispanic, and indigenous. With gender, I identify as non binary, trans, sexuality. gay slash queer, I use them interchangeably, and demisexual. And then with religion, I would say I'm agnostic. I don't really subscribe to any religion, but I'm in like interested into spirituality and stuff around that topic.
So did you say that you use the words queer and gay interchangeably?
Yes.
Okay, can you talk a little bit more, or can you say what that means to you to identify as queer and gay? And then you also said demisexual. So what does that? What does that? Yeah, mean to you?
So I use queer and gay interchangeably because with uh transitioning and slowly learning about more sexualities and all that, it's like I would say sexuality is fluid, and I know mine is a bit fluid. So I would that's basically why I use queer and gay interchangeably, because like most of the time I am attracted to men or very just like masculine people, but every few off times I'll be attracted to women or just very feminine people. So if I say queer, that's basically why. And then I identify as demisexual, and that means you develop a sexual attraction for someone once there is a emotional bond established. For me, that isn't always necessary, or it doesn't take as long as some people expect it to be, because when you kind of like look up when a demisexual person finally establishes that sexual attraction for someone, to be like, oh yeah, it took me months or years, and I was like, no, I can't really relate to that. But that just partly is because when I like first meet someone, if like we really click, that really like kind of helps me out in a way with the sexual attraction. So that just kind of like further up the process more of creating an emotional bond.
So do you put being demisexual on the asexual spectrum?
Yeah, I definitely do.
Okay. Do you use the word asexual to sometimes to identify yourself?
No, not really. I know before when I wasn't like too sure about my sexuality, and just like, especially with transitioning, it's made me explore many identities. So for a while I did use that, but I don't think that is a label that really fits me. So I just use demisexual.
So you mentioned that you're transmasculine and non-binary. What does it mean to you to identify as both transmasc and non-binary?
To me, it just means that I'm like a person who is very masculine, and like, at least in terms of gender identity, uh I just stray away from femininity. I may like act feminine with like the way I talk or the way I do certain things, but that means nothing in terms of gender identity to me, because that's not how I feel inside.
And then the combination of transmasc and non-binary.
Um, I would say that's just me being like just a masculine person who is existing and doesn't uh just doesn't vibe with their science sex at first, ultimately.
Okay, so if you would, how would you distinguish between transmasculinity and cis masculinity?
I would say transmasculinity is when someone creates their own sense of masculinity, while cis masculinity is kind of like set up for you, like an expectation because of society and how society views gender.
Is there any other way that you would distinguish between the two in terms of your own personal experiences with transmasculinity and how you see cis masculinity playing out for cis men?
Mm, I'm not too sure. I would say it's kind of like transmasculinity is different because while growing up as someone who was AFAB and viewed as a girl, I did like do masculine things, like growing up, like little things, but it wasn't as big in a sense. But now with transitioning all that, it's become like a bigger thing. While cis masculinity, it's like number one thing in a sense. Like everything that's associated with it, it's like you have to be masculine. While with trans masculinity, you didn't always have to be masculine, or at least like you grew up with not that expectation, but now you identify with masculinity one way or another and have set up like your own expectations with masculinity, so now you perform that in your own way.
So you use he and they pronouns. Can you explain why your pronouns are important? And do you have any preference between the two?
I don't have any preference between those two at all, but I use them because they both feel very gender affirming because I well, I do like primarily feel masculine. There are some days where, in a sense, I feel like gender neutral. So that's why I would say I use prefer like primarily why I use he they instead of he him or they them.
So when you share your pronouns with people, do you prefer for people to use he and they interchangeably?
Yeah, interchangeably. I know sometimes some people use them one over the other, which doesn't really bother me personally. I know that's ever for some people.
So under what circumstances do you share your pronouns with people?
I mainly share them when I'm in a school setting, uh, or somewhere where I know is safe, or if I meet someone, and they like say, "Oh, my pronouns are blank. What are your pronouns?" That's when like I feel comfortable sharing them.
Okay, and so can you explain a little bit more, if possible, why that is?
Uh, Mainly because not a lot of societies today will accept just at first they them pronouns, and then the fact that people use multiple pronouns. Yeah, unfortunately.
Can you talk some about your coming out experience? What was the process like of figuring out your identity?
I had at least known that I wasn't a girl during the pandemic for a while. That like took me a long time to really at least figure out some sort of gender identity. I remember when I like first figuring out that I wasn't a girl, I the only other gender identity I'd heard of was like non-binary, and at that time it didn't really fit me, but I just kind of went with it because it was like basically the only other gender identity I knew, so I just went with it. And slowly throughout the years, I kind of learned more about different gender identities, uh, experimented with them, and then towards the middle of 2022 is kind of when I like fully come to realize I was like, oh, I'm trans, and like kind of like a trans man way in a sense, like, and I didn't think that was like a possibility for me sometimes because I was like, oh no, that's like for other people, not for me, and I was like, no, it is for you.
And how did you learn about that possibility for yourself?
I kind of learned about it when I like met some other people that were uh primarily people that were non-binary. I think at that point I hadn't really met any other like trans men or trans women, for example. So when like I saw how they were really comfortable with their gender and all that, and we would sometimes discuss like other gender identities in our journey, that's when I kind of like slowly like became more comfortable with the idea of at least at least what I tell cis people and like non-safe people. I was like, to an extent, I'll like be like, oh yeah, I'm a trans man. So like at least to kind of like identify as like trans man, trans mass, and like so on. I like that's when I like slowly became to like, oh, I'm these gender identities, like I can be that comfortably and it's an option for me.
And can you talk about your coming out process to family and friends?
I ironically I changed my name before coming out, so I don't know if when I did come out to my parents, if then they realized were like, oh, that's why you changed your name. I don't know what they thought. But my dad was pretty open to it. He didn't like fully understand it, but he was more open, primarily because he grew up in the Bay. And for a while, it took my mom to understand what trans is because she was like, I kind of get gay and bisexual, but not fully. So my dad kind of learned pretty quickly compared to her, but they both like were pretty accepting when I came out, and it's just all been a learning curve with them.
And are you out to other family members as well?
Yeah, I'm out to my dad's side. I see a lot. Then the other part of my dad's side I don't see. I out to like the ones I basically have on social media. I don't have all of them on social media because we're a big family. And with my mom's side, I'm out to more immediate family than uh, all of like my million cousins, it feels like. But we don't really see them, which I'm kind of happy about because they're the kind of like typical conservative country people. So it's like if they know, they know. If they don't, they don't. But I don't see them, so I don't care.
Is much of your family outside of Sacramento?
Yeah, a lot of my mom's immediate family is primarily in Oregon and Washington, and then ironically, our extended family is in Lodi/Elk Grove area. But we like just never really run into each other or talk that much for whatever reason. I don't know why.
And you said your dad's family's in the Bay?
Uh, not. I think some might still be in the Bay, but at least for immediate family, they live in Roseville, and then for extended family, they live in France.
Um, so what about friends? Are you out to all your friends?
Yeah, I'm out to like pretty much all my friends. Um, I'm sure some of them like know without have me having to say, partly because like social media and what I've like posted about was being trans, like was being on testosterone and having top surgery. So
Oh, you've talked about that on social media.
yeah.
Can you talk more about that?
Yeah, when I got top surgery, I remember one of my friends that I talked to while commented, is like, I missed a couple chapters in this episode. I was like, yep, you did. It's been a journey. But yeah, I uh, got top surgery about 3 months ago now, and then I uh, have been on gear T now, a couple months ago in August, and with all that, it's been a journey. And with top surgery, uh, my boyfriend has helped me out a little bit and kind of been like, no, you can't do this, no, you can't do that. And they're like, now you can do this, now you can do that. So he's been there with me and saw all the fun, ugly parts.
Is your boyfriend also trans?
No, he cis.
Oh, the way you said that made me think that he was trans.
No, he does know a bit about like trans people and like basically what they experienced and all that, especially because he had a past roommate who is trans. So I believe from that past roommate, that's how he learned all of what he knew besides what I've taught him. So
How long have you two been together?
we have been together for 4 months now.
So how do you feel now that you kind of have figured out that you're transmasc as well as non-binary, and you've gone through the surgery and you're on hormones. How does it make you feel?
I feel great. I feel better than I've ever been. I It actually feels like my body is now my own body, and I could really do what I want with it now.
So you're happy?
Yeah.
Um, let's see. So, one thing you haven't mentioned is so has your family, your more immediate family, like your parents, have they been good with your pronouns, or how has that been?
With pronouns, they definitely need a little bit more learning with. They primarily use he, him for me. They sometimes use they. And I know my dad, even like before I came out, he's always used like a combination of like feminine and like gender neutral language for me. So he's like he sometimes will say, "Oh yeah, oh my daughter," blah blah blah. He'll also be like on the flip side, "Oh my child," blah blah blah. So at least he's always done that with me. So that was somewhat easy for him. But then now it's like, oh, you have to change daughter to son and so on and so forth.
So have they been doing better as time goes on in terms of how the gendered language that they use?
Yeah, definitely. It's been more of a challenge with my mom, but my dad, at least in comparison, has like gotten it better, gotten it a little bit quicker, uh, and is a bit better about being conscious about it.
How does it feel when you're misgendered by people in your family?
It sucks, and it's not surprising to some extent, especially depending on the relative. Because with my dad's immediate family, they're conservative, and I remember I had to, after I came out as trans, I had to cut them off for a while, because at that point I had been going by at least Frankie for 6 months, I want to say, and they like basically rarely said it, like rarely used my name, so I had to like cut them off for a bit, and then somehow since cutting them off, they like pretty much now use Frankie 24/7. I know sometimes my aunt will trip up and will say my dead name. I know my grandma, it's a little bit having to learn how to say, like, not use gender term for me, because she'll like always say, "Oh, my sweet girl" to me and stuff like that, or my precious girl.
And if you could tell family members who make mistakes, either yeah, whether intentional or not, if you could tell them like why is it's important for them to put the effort into not using the incorrect gendered language for you, what would you say?
I would say that it is important to use a correct gender language, because with either misgendering or dead naming, it's like you're trying to talk to someone that's not really there anymore in a sense. And I know I obviously know my dead name and all that, but even when I hear it sometimes, I like don't always answer to it. So I've gone to the habit of not always answering to it. It like you basically have to say it like 2 or 3 times for me to answer to it. Or even like with ma'am, like lady or whatever, any other like gender terms too. It's like I don't immediately answer to it. It's like you have to say a couple times for me to answer to it. That's like the only way I will. Other than that, it's you it's using the correct like gender language and the correct name. It will definitely help my mental health and basically my relationship with you, because I'm not afraid to cut people off if I need to, especially if it's family. And I know my dad's side is like, oh yeah, we're like family, we're really close and all that. Well, I don't particularly feel that way. I know that's how they are, and it's like I will cut you off if I need to. I'm not afraid to.
Um, was it sort of difficult to figure out, or how, I guess, how should I frame this question? Um, does your family have expectations, either your mom's side or your dad's side, expectations around uh, femininity and masculinity that made it difficult for you to try to navigate your own gender identity?
Oh yeah. With growing up, I've mainly seen my dad's immediate family just because they were closer to us than my mom's side. So growing up, uh I went to Catholic school and with the uniforms, even though they didn't like flat tell us like, oh, boys had to wear polo and slacks and girls had to wear a polo and a dress over it. That was always expected of us. So because of that, I'd always worn a polo and a dress. So for like at least for like 5 or so years of my life, I basically only really worn dresses, and because I was at least somewhat comfortable with the dress I was wearing for my uniform. Uh, so when my uncle and my aunt would take me out to get a new dress for an event, I like did not like it at all because I had like no say in it at all. I couldn't even say, "Oh, I want this style dress" or "I want this color" to make me at least somewhat comfortable in the dress. But they're like, "No, we're going to this type of event, so you have to wear this colors. You have to wear this type of dress, and you have to wear these uncomfortable ass flats that you hate." So, especially with like moments like that growing up, I like always like just didn't want those times to come. It's like, oh no, I'm gonna see them tomorrow. I'm gonna go to Macy's and all that. So, was at least for dressing up for events like that, I'd always dreaded it. I think with that and with how I grew up going to Catholic school, it didn't help with me realizing at least some part of my gender growing up. Like I thought like, oh yeah, I'm a girl, femininity, awesome, cool stuff type of thing. And so I like always was expected because of that, like to be a girl and like I was like a little bit of a tomboy, so they didn't expect me to be a girly girl at least, which I'm happy about. But so they expected me to do certain things, like my grandmother taught me how to sew, and typically women know how to sew in the family and stuff like that. So even though like I know she meant well and all that, and she wanted that to be like sort of a bonding experience, I did not always like those type of experiences that we would do, or like stuff like that, those activities.
Can you talk some about the role that religion played in your life growing up?
So growing up with having gone to Catholic school, it was like there from the beginning, and my parents weren't very religious, but my dad, at least up until college, he had only gone to Catholic school, so to him that was normal. Uh, I know when I was little, my parents were uh debating on whether to send me to Catholic school or to the school in Woodland called Beamer. It's a dual immersion school where they teach you everything in English and Spanish. So with my mom wanting to have me still keep my Spanish and all that, they're like, no, Frankie needs to go to the Holy Rosary. No, Frankie needs to go to Beamer. And just butting heads with that. But then, some way, somehow, they said, you're going to Holy Rosary. So, at least the time that I went there, that's when me and my parents were the most religious. And I say that in quotes because that's basically the only time we participated in Lent or did Advent. Really, it's because I had to.
How did you
And
like going there?
I only went there up until first grade. I had gone to the daycare there and then the preschool there. Uh, but I only gone there up till first grade because we couldn't pay for it anymore. But it was. no K school, I don't have like always the fondest of memories. I know one big memory I have is that I was learning about Easter, and I remember I asked some question. I don't remember what it was. I don't remember what my teacher answered with, but one way or another, it upset her. So she like began to yell at me. So then I like started to cry and just went to my desk. So I was like, I don't like this anymore. Like this is not fun. Like it's supposed to be Easter. It's supposed to be fun because the Easter bunny.
So do you think your family's religion? I know you said they're not that religious, but do you think their religion um, influenced their reaction to your sexual orientation and gender identity?
I don't really think so. With primarily more as my dad. I know my mom. She also grew up. They both grew up like at least somewhat religious. I don't know how varying they grew up with like religion, but I think just because of how my mom grew up in regards to like religion and just like her living in a very very small town, like I could just like go up and say, "Oh yeah, I'm related to blank," and people will know my family history. And I think just because that it like takes her at least a while for things to click, but I would say they're ultimately both pretty accepting. You just need to teach them maybe if you need to, if they don't know much about whatever you're coming out as.
Um, okay, anything else you want to say about religion before moving on to the next section?
Uh, no, not really. I would say it's religion hasn't been like impactful in my life, but it's always been there. My dad's immediate family is very Catholic. Like, even after me and my parents stopped attending Mass and all that, they'd be like, "Oh, yeah, we're going to Mass on Christmas, so come join us." And we're like, "Oh, okay, we'll go at your guys' church." So it's just always been there, and I know my uncle is really big on saying grace before you eat, so I was like, "Oh, yeah, we can't eat straight away. Damn it."
Does that make you feel uncomfortable sometimes?
A little bit. Like, I grew up with that being normal, so it's like I kind of understand why they do it and all that, but also it's like we don't need to do it for every meal, and I'm really hungry, so I'd rather just eat.
So I think you said you identify as agnostic, right? So you don't identify as Catholic?
No, not anymore. Straight away from that fully.
And why is that?
With how I like grew up with religion and it for me being like basically instant conformity in many ways in regards to like gender and like societal expectations and all that. I remember even like before realizing that I was queer in any way, I like once me and my parents stopped going to mass. Like I remember when the only reason we stayed going for a while was because this like basically Christian rock band started to play during mass, and we love rock. So like this is the only reason why we're staying is because of you guys. Then when they left the church, we just stopped going. Um, but we religion has never been like really important thing to me. I know I've always had trouble paying attention in mass with both being at the actual church and when my school decided to have mass in the gym for whatever reason.
Okay, so the next section is about disability and neurodiversity. So you mentioned that you are neurodivergent, that you have a few conditions. Can you talk about that a little bit? How being neurodivergent has impacted you and your in general and your education in particular.
Yeah, I've PTSD, OCD, and APDD. APD. I actually got diagnosed with APD. Yeah, APD, and when I was younger, cause my teacher in first grade noticed that because the APD is it's auditory processing disorder. So she noticed that like when we would talk about like a certain topic or whatever, I would ask questions about it when we were done talking about it. So she's like, maybe you should get your kid checked out for this. So I went to speech therapy up until third grade, I want to say, and I have like this APD. I would say it's something easily recognizable in children and you typically grow out of it, but I still think for at least people who have it, there's slow moments where you deal with it. So there is still like sometimes where it just takes me a while to process what is being said. And with that, I like pretty much grew out of it for the most part. Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit more about that? Like, what is APD and how did it affect you when you were a kid? How did it affect your education? And when you say that you, you said you have difficulty processing what you're hearing, like
Yeah.
thinking about what you're hearing, basically, is that, can you, yeah, elaborate?
It's more of when people are like giving you instructions and like, oh, like with swimming math, for example, it's like, oh yeah, 2 plus 2 is 4, so write that out. With that, it took me a while to like really process it and like understand what I was told to do. So like even with instructions, people be like, oh yeah, do XYZ to do this, and it took me a while to like really like understand what the instructions were and what I had to do. So I'd always have to be like, so you want me to do this, this, and this, right? And like always had to clarify and always like make sure I'm like doing things right because of that.
Okay. Anything else you want to say about APD? How it affected your education? Does it affect you now that you said you've mainly grown out of it, but does it affect you in the classroom at all right now?
I would say it doesn't. If it does affect me, it does every now and again. I would say it's very rare. I know typically I always ask like clarification for instructions. I don't know if it's because like that is some habit from it or I just do it just because of that. I don't know why fully, but was growing up, I at least not that I can remember. I don't know if there were any like accommodations for me surrounding it or all that because I remember when I actually like asked my mom like, wait, why did I take speech therapy again? Like, because I thought I took it because like every other like kid that grew up speaking Spanish, I had a lisp. But she's like, no, you didn't have one. You were fine. You just had an auditory processing disorder. I was like, what? I do not remember this. I remember speech therapy, but not that. So at least I can't remember any accommodations that I got if I did get any.
Do you seek accommodations at ARC or CRC?
No, not at the moment. I would say I'm pretty good with like in terms of education, like with test taking and understanding things now. I think it's just more of like getting myself to actually do my assignment sometimes and like having a motivation.
So you said you also have PTSD and OCD. How do those impact you?
With PTSD, I got that due to a traumatic event at 12. Um, that wasn't necessarily fun. It was a bad experience, and actually, with that, I have uh PTSD and anxiety like go together due to that event. But I would say it doesn't have too much of an impact on me. It only really does if I'm out late, especially by myself, because of what the event happened really late at night and I was by myself, basically. And then with OCD, I'm not 100% sure, but from the signs, it seems like it is hereditary in my family. Cause I remember my grandmother telling me how her mom was like cleanliness, stuff like that, and seeing how she is with cleanliness and stuff like that, and kind of her talking about my dad was being cleanliness and stuff like that, and then seeing how I am with it, I was like, oh, I think it runs in the family. I think that's OCD.
Does that impact your education at all? Your PTSD and your OCD?
Not really. I know my OCD only really impacts me if like I want to do something in a certain way. Like when I take out the garbage at home, I do it a certain way. And like when I fold the laundry, I have to like do in that little routine that I have to like make everything feel right and stuff like that. Like if I just don't do it right, it feels weird and everything feels off for the rest of the day, pretty much. Unless I could somehow do something to make it feel right.
You said sometimes you have issues motivating to get your work done. Can you elaborate?
With work and like with just life in general, it's not always easy to get motivated to do homework, even if it's like it can be a subject that interests me. Uh, Especially with like some things that just happen in life. It's like, oh no, I like am really focused on work or just life happening, and it's like, no, I can't like do my homework because of this. Mm.
Okay, so do you see any relationship between the fact that you're neurodivergent and the fact that you're queer and trans?
I would say a little bit, yeah. I would say they kind of. I wouldn't say I am like queer and trans because of like PTSD, for example, because I know that can play a big part with like how I do certain things now and like being conscious of X, Y, and Z. But I would say they kind of coincide together because, well, like, yes, the event that happened, and I now have PTSD due to it. That it's not because I am like queer and trans. That just is like kind of, I would say, happens to be a common factor, I guess you could say. Or like they just coincide together. Like this just happens to be a thing, and because of like my PTSD, that it can make sense why, but that's not the reason why I'm queer and trans.
There are a fair number of people who are queer who are also neurodivergent. It seems like there's a fairly big queer neurodivergent community,
Hmm.
like online on Discord, but also in the groups like the GSA. Why do you think that is?
Uh, I know that at least with autism, there seems to be a big like coincidence with being trans. I don't ultimately know the reason why, but I would say it's just being neurodivergent in general and just being queer and trans. It I would say those factors kind of can coincide together. It's not like because oh someone has this neurodivergent trait that means this, and it's like no, I think they just coincide and just happen to be common recurrence.
So, in relationships with friends and partners, do you feel like it's important that your sort of these people that you're in a relationship with um, understand neurodivergence in addition to sort of understanding queerness?
Yeah, definitely. I would say like a good amount of my friends either are neurodivergent themselves or they like understand certain traits about neurodiversity in general. And my boyfriend, he like knows a good amount of things about it, and like he'll pick up on like some little things I do because of like OCD, for example. So he'll be like, "Are you doing that because of your OCD?" And I'm like, "Maybe."
Okay, anything else you want to say about being neurodivergent in general? How to, being neurodivergent in education in particular?
I would say the system needs to be a little bit better about it. I know, obviously, depending on where you are and how you are learning in school, it could look different for everybody. But I think at least in the U.S., at least needs to be better to be more accommodating for people and to kind of stop regarding people's disabilities as like people's special needs and be like, no, they have disabilities for like we don't need to discuss why they have disabilities, but they do. It's not like a special needs; it's disabilities.
And what kind of accommodations do you think should be provided in our education system and by professors for disabled and neurodivergent people?
Having like basically all the staff having better knowledge about it, at least that, because I don't think every like teacher does have knowledge on, uh, for example, autism as may another one, and I don't think it should be ultimately placed on those the teachers who helped out the kids with disabilities to know all of that knowledge. I think if you're a teacher, you should at least have a general understanding of at least what the students that are at your school have with their disability and have a general understanding of it and how you could help their needs.
So more training and education for our faculty.
Yeah.
Okay, so you mentioned that you are white, Hispanic, and indigenous. Can you elaborate some on your ethnic and racial identities?
Yeah, my dad's side is white and Hispanic, and then my mom's side is white and indigenous. My dad's side is primarily French, mainly because of my grandmere, was being from France. With his side, we don't really know much about Chilean culture or traditions. I know he didn't grow up with the language. Uh, he grew up speaking French, mainly because of my grandmere. But I don't know if my grandpa ever really knew any Chilean traditions or cultures, or even a little bit of the language. I'm not too sure about that. And then with my mom's side, uh, was like similarities to my dad. I think she knows more about her German, Russian, Ukrainian side versus her indigenous side because of immigration, essentially. I think because basically both sides of my family have immigration that's like more new in terms like generations is because why we don't know much about our other cultures that are also from Europe and why we don't know about the Hispanic slash indigenous side of our families. I think just because immigration plays a big factor into like carry on traditions into the US and trying to continue speaking French and German that it's not really focused on was being indigenous and Hispanic.
What tribes is your mom connected to?
She is from the Wyandotte and Huron tribes. A lot of people say that they're one tribe, some say they're two. It's an ongoing debate with even within the tribal community. I know if you like look up wyandotte.org, I want to say that's the URL, but looking at the official tribal page, you see uh on like somewhere on the far right side of it, there's like a little column where people like be like, "Oh, it's no, it's one tribe because of blah blah blah," but then you hear people argue that no, it's two. So
Or do you feel connected to any to your racial and ethnic identities? Like, do you feel connected to your mom's indigenous side at all? Do you feel connected to your dad's Hispanic side?
I feel connected to my mom's indigenous side in like a spiritual way at least. I feel like there is certain things that me and my mom do that could be traced to that. I don't know if it is for sure, but at least spiritually I feel like we're connected to it. But we just don't know any traditions or holidays, stuff like that. And with my dad's Hispanic side, I would say there's like a full disconnection from there. I know I'm like slowly trying to learn basically like Chilean slang in Spanish as I'm slowly regaining my Spanish and like kind of learning a little bit how they speak, trying to the best I could pick up on the accent. It is a struggle from what I already how I speak Spanish was trying to learn that accent, especially since I have like nobody to learn it with. So that makes it hard and yeah, it's hard on both sides because basically because of like immigration, like being French and German are so focused. Even though I don't really know a whole lot about German traditions and I know a little bit about French traditions. But yeah, I think it's also because of like being very Americanized as well with my family.
Do you identify with the term multiracial?
Yeah, I do.
Have you been trying to learn about your indigenous side more?
For a while I was trying to learn quite a bit about it. I haven't like really tried again in a while, but I do have a book about the Huron tribe, and it states that it originally started in Canada, and there was some kind of tribal war, and that's basically why there's now the Huron and the Wyandots. So the Wyandots ultimately come from the Huron tribe, but because of that in the history, there's like a lot of people debating saying like, oh no, there's just two tribes, no, they're one. So now at least the Wyandotte community is in Oklahoma and another state. I know it's neighboring to Oklahoma, but I can't think of it at the moment.
Have you heard of the term two spirit?
Yes, I have. I'm not sure if that is a term that my tribes use or not. When I ever try to do like research on them, it's very hard, even though there is a national, like official Wyandotte website. It's so hard, especially because I'm not in that state. So I'm like farther away to learn it, and I'm even like farther away from Canada to learn about the Huron.
Um, so, do you think there's a relationship between your racial and ethnic identities and your queerness?
Um, I don't really think there is much because, while I did grow up knowing a little bit about French traditions and some like the cultural customs, I primarily growing up knowing about like Mexican traditions and the cultures, their culture. So I would say I don't really have a whole lot of knowledge on like my own cultures. I have more knowledge a little bit about Mexican culture. So
Is that because you grew up in Woodland?
yeah, it's primarily Hispanic, mainly Mexican. I know there are a couple Puerto Ricans there and people from other Spanish speaking countries, but it is heavily Mexican, I would say.
Um, okay. Anything else you want to say about your identity as multiracial, multi-ethnic?
I know when I say like uh I more likely bring up the fact that I'm Hispanic more than the fact that I'm indigenous just because I know a little bit more about my Hispanic side in a sense, and with like my indigenous side, it's really hard to like get anything really. So I think that's why I primarily bring on my Hispanic side. But even then, there's some people kind of like act surprised or question me, and like I know one time before, our a lot of our clean ladies are older ladies who primarily speak Spanish, and I was like speaking Spanish to one of them, and like they said, "Oh, I didn't know you speak Spanish. You look Russian." I was like, "Well, I am technically, so yes, but that doesn't mean I can't speak Spanish or that I'm not Hispanic." I think because of the fact that I'm white passing, a lot of people are like, "No, you're just white. You're not Hispanic. You don't understand what we're saying at all."
So you feel like your identity, your multiracial identities sort of are hidden and you have to kind of come out.
Yeah, and even like when I do come out with it, it's feels a little bit weird and awkward to do because sometimes I feel like people just think I'm doing it for like attention in a sense or to like be like, "Oh yeah, I'm one of you guys" in like a weird way, but it's like no, I'm actually am and I'm trying to learn more about my culture and like I know I'll sometimes like do that with people who are Mexican or Salvadorian or Puerto Rican and they like probably don't know about slang culture or anything like that. Even with that, I still like try to connect with it in some way because I feel like if I at least don't learn more about my culture, it is important to at least learn about generally other Hispanic cultures and tradition as a way to like connect with my Chilean side because there is like some stuff that like other countries do that either done the same in Chile or similarly. So I can find like some commonality in that.
Has your racial and ethnic identities, have they impacted your education at all? Like what kind of, yeah, I guess I'll just leave it there, the broad question.
Um, I wouldn't say too much just because, especially with my dead name, a lot of people just assume, oh, you're just white. You know, we don't have to have you do anything in terms of like any multicultural events. And even though I couldn't really do anything for Chile if I want to, because of like not knowing much about traditions or anything like that, if I feel a lot of disconnect from it. So I feel like if I wanted to do something like that, I would have to actually go there and see what it's like myself, essentially.
Did choosing the name Francisco, did that give you an opportunity to signal to other people what your ethnic identity is more?
Yeah, and ironically, uh, not exactly Francisco, but Francis is a somewhat common family name. And ironically, because I've done like ancestry, it is the same name as at least so far I can find my ancestor that is from Chile. And as far as I know, he is the only one with like the amount of research I could do. I don't think Chile has digitized much of their documents, so it is far hard to find his parents and all that. But at least from what I can find and all that, he is like the ancestor that at least kind of started, in a sense, the reason why we're Chilean.
Did you find that information out before you chose Francisco?
Yeah, I've known that for a good 10 years, I want to say.
Oh,
So,
so that's interesting.
yeah.
How about like in your classes? Do you find yourself when you are given the freedom to choose what you are going to focus on, like what you're going to write, like essays you're going to write? Do you find yourself being drawn to learning more about your ethnic and racial heritage?
Sometimes, yeah, there sometimes like other topics will just pop up in my head, so I might do those more. then try to do something about Chile, for example. But I would say it just kind of depends, especially if they're like, oh, we want you to like obviously do something that relates to you, but like in a particular way. So it just kind of ultimately depends on stuff like that and whatever I come up with.
Um, okay, anything else about that that you want to talk about?
No, not I can think of.
Okay, the next section is about class. So, can you talk some about your family's class background and your own current economic class status?
So me and my family grew up middle class. I am pretty sure my parents also grew up middle class. I am very sure that they grew up on different spectrums of that. I think my mom was lower middle class and my dad was upper middle class because my mom was raised on a ranch in a very small town of Oregon, and then my dad, even though it was my grandmother being from France and all, she was still able to obtain a good amount of jobs without having her college education be really good enough here in a sense. And my grandpa, he had a military background and he was a firefighter for 27 years. So I would say because of knowing what my jobs my grandmother did and was my grandpa's job background, I would say that my dad grew up upper middle class.
So, when you say upper middle class and then lower middle class, what does that mean to you in terms of like how much money they made?
I would say it means like that my mom just grew up with less money and maybe less opportunity for jobs, especially because she had five siblings. And I know my dad, he just had the one sibling, so at least with my mom's family, they had more mouths to feed and they had to keep a farm going. So they take care of the cows, chickens, and any other animals that they had on the farm. And obviously, take take care of the equipment and all that. So and that obviously costs a lot of money. It's not an easy thing for people to do. But I know my mom was would always help out on the farm. I know she told me she even delivered milk. And with my dad, I at least don't think he really struggled financially growing up, at least from what I have heard. I don't know for sure, but at least it's never really talked about. It seems like they're at least well off to an extent where they could pass by in life and not have to worry too much about money. Like, I imagine there are probably instances where they did, but not maybe as much as my mom's family.
And what do your parents currently do for a living?
My mom is now an elementary teacher, just like her mom. And my dad works at a gas station, but he is an electrician. That's why he went to school. He still does electrical jobs on the side, and I would say this is also kind of his third job, but not really in a sense. It's taking care of a family friend who I consider my aunt. Because right now she's disabled. My dad and her neighbor help her basically get groceries, help her to see her husband who's in currently in a nursing home right now. Uh, so I would say that's also kind of like his third job, like a caretaker essentially for
Well,
her.
that's nice. How did he come to take on that responsibility?
Luckily we live very close to her. Like I would say her house is a 5 minute drive from us. Um, and she's like a very nice lady. She is my uncle's godmother, so she's pretty close to my family. And like whenever we events, we pretty much always invite her and her husband. Right now, at the moment, it's just mainly her going to events because unfortunately her husband isn't able to with how things are at the nursing home and with his current status, essentially medical status. So.
And is she not able to do that much for herself?
I would say she's able to do a fair amount. Like, she's still able to, like, depending on what she's making, she can cook on her own. I can't, and bake on her own. I don't think she can do as much as she used to. Like, she's always pretty much been a baker. She can still, like, use the bathroom on her own, change on her own, but I know, like, there's certain things she can't really do on her own with like extensive cooking. I know my dad is gonna help her if he hasn't already make a casserole, I believe. Um, and was like he will take her out to get her haircuts. He'll take her out to go on appointments and all that to the doctors and help her see her husband at the nursing home. Luckily, it's not a far drive from her as well. I think it's about 10-minute drive. So.
So, with regard to their class status, do you feel do they ever seem like they're stressed out about finances?
Oh yeah, there's definitely been times in my life where we've been stressed out with finances. I know growing up, I wasn't very aware of that because you're just like a little kid focusing on little kid things. But growing up as I got older and I was like, oh, we can't like spend, like we can't get this little extra thing because of money, especially with my dad not making as much as my mom.
Okay, we left off talking about class, and you said that you do remember your parents being feeling stressed about finances. Is there anything else you want to say about that? Like, how did that impact your life? The stress about finances.
I know for a while, for like a tiny bit, we were somewhat well off, at least in a sense, to get like a nicer house and all that. But then I wanted to say when the economic crash in like 2007, we were back to kind of like how we were living before. So like we only live at least like not lavish, but at least nice for a good 2 years. And it was like a really nice house. It was like there's a big office space. It was like really big. And it was how small my bed was. My bedroom seems way bigger than it actually was. But it was like a really nice house. I would like to live in a house like that again if I could. Other than that, we just kind of lived in smaller houses and trying to pass by every now and again. So yeah.
Do your parents help you with school, paying for school?
In the beginning, my dad would pay for my classes. Now he does that every now and again. Sometimes I'll even just have him pay for my textbooks, especially because like I'm studying sociology now. If it's like a textbook that would just like help me in the long run, it was like, hey, you wanna pay for this for me? Especially because it's like $100 over. You wanna pay for it?
So, do you work?
Yeah, I work part time at Macy's. I am one of their associates in the return department. It is interesting, to
Why
say
do
the
you say
least.
that?
Well, for at least when I started there, we had a 90-day return policy. And then in March of this year, we changed to 30 days. And right now we have our holiday extension. But even with that, it has been so hard for people to get the hang of it. Like the other day, literally my last shift, someone was like, "Oh, I want to return this pair of underwear because it doesn't like fit me like how I want to." And she had tags taken off. She didn't even have the right tag with her, but she got it in March when we started our 30 days. And I was like, "Man, it's been 7 months. This is even if we still had 90 days, this is way past 90 days. This is well over."
Do people get upset when they can't return things?
Yeah, it's beautiful to see, to say the least. And we also do order pickups because our apartment manages it as well, so sometimes we have problems with that. I remember one night, me and a coworker were closing. This lady decided to come in 2 minutes till close, be like, "There's an error with my order," and blah blah blah. And I was closing the last register, and I was like half listening to her because I was like, "Dude, we're almost out, please." But I knew from like even just half listening, I was like, "Yeah, no, we can't do that. You're gonna have to call online customer service." And she like, "Oh, well, I know you're new." And I was like, "No, I'm not. I'm just tired of you, and it's 2 minutes till close, and I'm almost done with this register."
How long have you worked at Macy's?
A year now, surprisingly.
And how many hours do you work each week?
I work about 20 hours a week,
What do you get paid?
$17 an hour.
And what does that pay for you? Like, does that pay for living expenses, educational stuff?
Uh, Partly for education and partly for just uh like getting food, clothes, and all that. Because I still live with my parents, so I don't have to pay rent or anything, at least at the moment.
Do you think you're going to have to pay rent soon?
Yeah, me and my boyfriend plan to move when his lease is up, and we're gonna move with his roommate and his roommate's girlfriend. So at least with us, there'll be 4 ways to split rent. So hopefully, I won't have to pay too much, but at least a good amount.
Where are you hoping to move to?
Uh, because of where my boyfriend works and where his roommate works, because with both of like what they do, it seems like it might be long term, especially with what his roommate does. But I think we're gonna at least try to move to like Fair Oaks, Rosemont, Folsom area, kind of like that broad area of Sacramento, like somewhere around there, ideally. But I don't know if we need to like move to like Oak Park or the Pocket. Like we'll do it if we have to. If like for some reason that is like the only like there's a place over there in that area that seems better than any other places in areas that'd be better for their work.
So are you out at work as queer?
Yeah, I actually started at Macy's the day before I started testosterone, so I've been transitioning while at work. That has been an experience, not a pleasant one to say the least, but an experience.
Can you elaborate? What do you mean when you say that?
Uh, I pretty much introduced myself. I was like, "Oh yeah," even though the system says my dead name, I go by Frankie. These are my pronouns. I at least was work partly because at least was now knowing how a lot of my coworkers are and just like the general customers. I was like, oh yeah, I just go by he him pronouns and all that, and even with that, it is hard for them to like really grasp that, like use the correct like gender neutral language or gender language in general and correct pronouns. Like even now after I've had top surgery, there's still like some of them that use she her for me, and I was like, um. I don't have those characteristics anymore, even though I hid them very well, I would say.
So you get misgendered a lot by coworkers, and do you get all misgendered by customers?
I would say, at least now, with having top surgery, if I do get misgendered by coworkers and customers, it is every now and again. And I know with some of them, it's very certain ones. Like, I know if for some reason in their head they still just see girl or what, I don't know. But I want to say after like maybe 6 or 7 months on T, I started to get gender correctly more by customers for sure. Like I remember one like it was kind of funny in a sense, like because of how I identify as like queer and all that, but it felt very gender for me because this customer needed help in the handbag department and we're right next to it, so we basically manage that department as well, even though it's not like our priority. But I was helping someone look at some wallets, and she was like, "Oh, I know like you're not much into like purses and all that, but what's something you would get for like your girlfriend or your mom?" And I was just like, well, as long as it's like yes, but also no at the same time.
Yeah, lots of assumptions about gender.
Yeah, but I was like, obviously that lady meant well. I was like, okay, yeah, I'll try to help you in that sense.
So do you have issues with people intentionally misgendering you?
Uh, no, I at least to what it seems like and like to my knowledge, it doesn't seem like anybody intentionally means to misgender me at work. I think it just happens maybe because like they're not thinking or whatever it may be. I don't really think it's intentional, at least from what it seems like. I could be wrong.
So you don't have do you have coworkers that just consistently use the wrong pronouns?
Uh, there are a few. Like I want to say at the moment, only really three come up to my top of my head, but I don't see them like or interact them with them enough to for it to really be a problem. But yeah.
Were you worried about transitioning at work medically, like during the medical transition stuff while at work?
Yeah, I especially since I know it was my family like growing facial hair is like was my dad at least. I know he was a late bloomer, so I'm assuming I'm gonna be the same. But I know I eventually want to try out like a mustache just to see how it looks, especially because like my dad and my grandpa had a mustache, and we always say, "Oh, that's why you look like your dad." Basically, it's primarily because of the mustache, is like characteristic. So at least like want to try out that, and like assuming I do grow out a mustache and I'm still at Macy's, I don't know what they're gonna do about that. Then are they gonna suddenly stop misgendering me because I have a mustache, or I don't know.
Have you been able to change your legal paperwork?
Yeah, I have. Ironically, around the time I did, one of my coworkers got married, so she changed her last name, and they were asking me, how did you get your name changed on the store report, which just shows everybody that's working that day, what times they have their shifts at, and like when lunch is going to be and all that, in case someone needs to know. And for some reason, hers hasn't changed on the store report. And they're like, Frankie, how did your change? Like, I don't know. I haven't called HR yet, and suddenly I look one day and it's changed because she called HR about it, and she has a case with them about it now because the store can't really manage that. Apparently, Macy's HR has to manage that. I was like, well, I don't know what to tell you. It just magically changed.
So you're basically out at work by force of circumstance, sort of, because you were transitioning in the last year as when you got the job. And all of the coworkers, so all of your coworkers basically know that you're trans and queer.
I would say, yeah, most of them, pretty much, yeah.
Were you ever worried about your manager giving you fewer hours or firing you or anything like that? Have you had any issues with that?
No, I have a different manager now than I did when I got hired. This manager I got hired with, she made it seem like, even though like my name doesn't match in the system and stuff like that, like she would at least try to like be good about it and make sure everybody else is at least in my department, because obviously I interact with people in my department the most and my coworkers. So I would say she did a good job of that. The manager that I have now, she isn't the best like for other reasons. Like not a lot of people like her, unfortunately. But I haven't honestly interacted her with her much, so I don't know how she is. So
So do you ever find it difficult to focus on your classes while working 20 hours a week at Macy's?
no, I would say it's fairly easy to focus on classes. It's how much I work, which is a blessing and a curse because uh, I before like last semester they would give me like about 30 to 40 hours, and it's like I'm basically full time at school. Can you not? But then it's like also like money. So in a sense, I'm happy that I can focus more on school now than work. But then also with money, it's like no, I need more. So give me more hours. It's just like a fight that you can't win essentially.
Do you get regular hours or is your schedule all over the place?
Uh, it's kind of shifting a little bit with the holidays coming up, but I would say typically it's like regular hours. I mainly do closing shifts now, and before I would do just mid shifts and uh, a little bit of closing and opening, but now it's just primarily closing.
So you don't ever find, or have you found in the past that your job, the way you get scheduled, your hours get scheduled, has that interfered with being able to attend classes?
Luckily, no, because I will just tell uh my captain, who at least by Macy's standards is our people leader, so that's like the head of our department. uh I'll basically tell her like, I have classes on X, Y, and Z days. She'll like make sure to not schedule me at all like on those days, and like she doesn't even know the times I have classes at, because she's like, just like on the days you have classes, focus on like your school those days. Like don't worry about work at all, just focus on school.
So anything else you want to say about work, about being queer at work?
Was working at a job like Macy's, where was Macy's have in the past being like known to be a place that basically only people with money go to, and I know partly I want to say customers said this when being upset with us, but they're like, oh no, Macy's like Walmart now, like basically people with no money can kind of shop here, and like they have that kind of attitude essentially, and it's like, okay, you're being ridiculous, but it's like people, just because of how Macy used to be, I think people expect us, like employees, to dress a certain way, act a certain way, and so on and so forth. And I just stand there as like the alternative employee that has tattoos and piercings. So it's very interesting working there. I would say
Is there a dress code?
there is, unfortunately, ironically, a couple weeks ago, I saw a manager wearing a graphic tee when technically we're not supposed to. So I was like, I hate you right now because I have a lot of graphic tees and I can't wear them at work because of the dress code. But you're wearing one right now.
Do you get a discount as an employee?
You only do if you sign up for a Macy's credit card, and because of how much interest Macy's has, even though at least as an employee the credit card would be a prepaid card, I am not doing that because it's so much interest. I'd rather just have the little free bronze phone number account that does like same thing as a credit card, but it's free.
So you don't get a discount without the credit card.
Mm-mm.
That sucks.
Yeah. So if you really want employee discount, you have to get the credit card and possibly deal with interest.
Well, one final question before moving on to education. So, is there anything like how do you like working at Macy's in general?
It's okay. It has its up and downs, especially with being in returns department. But at least like with some of the stuff that like we actually do, that's like not in regards to returns and all that, I kind of like it because I could like somewhat keep myself busy sometimes, not always, but with some of the moving around that we do for certain tasks, I like it. I don't unfortunately do some of those tasks now with being primarily someone that does closing. So I would say it kind of sucks more now because of that. Like I just kind of stay at the registers and all that.
So the time passes more slowly. Do you get health insurance through your job?
Uh, I know they offer it, but I still get it through my mom. Uh, Especially because I think her insurance might be a little bit better than Macy's. I don't know, but I at least have all my insurance through my mom. So
How many hours a week do you have to work at Macy's to get your insurance covered?
I'm not exactly sure, but I believe as long as you're employed there, you should still be offered it. I know they'll have like cycles of when they always offer it, but I think ideally you should always be offered it. I don't, at least as far as I know, I don't think there's like a rule about that.
Okay. So I want to start the education section off, but with a big question. So
Hmm.
can you tell me about your educational journey from high school to the present?
Uh, was high school, I actually went to two. One, I stayed out for 1 year. The rest, I stayed out for the rest of 3 years. The first one I went to, I didn't really like a whole lot, and I tried to voice that to my parents because I kind of got a vibe from school, but it also was like the second one I ended up going to. I was like, it's closer to home, so it'll be more ideal in that sense. But for some reason that didn't skip through. I know with my mom being a teacher, she kind of has some insight into the schools, especially in the district. So it's like, no, this one's better because of I heard A, B, and C. And I'm like, well, I think you should listen to your child more. I gotta say that.
So what high schools did you go to?
I went to Natomas Charter. I went through. I was in their VLA program, which is Virtual Learning Academy, which is how I knew I was bad with online learning before COVID happened. Half of my classes were in person, half my classes were online, and it was how we were learning online. It wasn't like Zoom at all. It was like completely asynchronous, so you had to teach yourself. And with that, it was like that little program at the school is very small, so there was like about 30 people in each grade because of that. And then the next school I went to was in the Thomas High. Uh I liked it because it was like I could actually walk to school and not have to worry about transportation. And with the people I met there, not a lot of them are like still with me in life, but I would say at least for like kind of being at high school in the presence there, it was a good thing and it was a good experience. I kind of wish I was there from the beginning so I could like get what some of the people were talking about, from freshman year. But it wasn't too bad, I would say. It was like there's normal high school drama and all that, and then we had our own problems within the school. I know we didn't like the principal a whole lot, and 1 year was my junior year. For some reason, half of my teachers quit. I don't know why. But for one of them, it took us a while to get a new teacher. We basically got her like a week before Thanksgiving break. With the other one, I can't remember when we got a new teacher for that one. But I know the last one, we got a new teacher basically sometime after winter break. That's how long it took to replace the teacher, unfortunately. So I had to deal with long term subs. And unfortunately, one of those subs was a little bit sexist.
Oh, why? Can you elaborate?
Uh, because I want to say, because he did some other subbing for some other classes at our school, and I want to say he was the first one to do it in our class, like at the school in general. And we kind of noticed that when basically some of the guys would ask like questions or answer any questions that he paid attention to that more than I know it's one of the girls like a lot of people say she was like very opinionated, but like in a good way because she would kind of call you out. I was like, no, that's wrong because of blah blah blah, and like it was never like meant in like a harmful way or anything. It was just kind of like in genuine like slash informal way to be like, hey, no, it's this. Or sometimes she would just have an opposing opinion for whatever reason, and he wouldn't like that. And for a while, he was subbing for the band kids, and they noticed that he was being sexist in that classroom as well. I'm not exactly sure how. So then the I don't know if it was a school or a district, but they said at least that he couldn't sub at our school anymore. I don't know about the district in whole, but it was very ironic because his last name was Cordial. And it's like, why are you being sexist? Your last name is Cordial. Be cordial.
Wow, he was so sexist at that school that he couldn't teach there anymore.
Yeah,
And you had to deal with him as a teacher.
yeah. He was, at least to me, he was okay. But like, it was like so obvious that he was sexist, and it was like, no, don't wanna put up with you.
Were you
So,
out as queer in high school?
uh, for the last 2 years, yeah, I had identified as bisexual, and I came out when I was still with my ex, and that was interesting because when I came out to him, I was like, "Oh, I'm bisexual," and he's like, "Oh, I knew because you dye your hair a lot." And I was like, "That doesn't mean anything, but okay. I know there's a common correlation, but why?" And that was a little interesting, especially because the relationship wasn't the best, and it was like a little bit of blindsided that because it's high school, but I was out and I eventually like was with a group of kids who some of them were also out as well as I know one girl identified as bi, one identified as a lesbian. I can't remember anybody else right now, but there are like a couple of kids in that group that were also out as queer in some way. So I felt good with them for the last year of high school since I graduated when COVID started.
You graduated in 2020, so right when COVID hit, basically
Mm-hmm.
you graduated a couple months later.
Yeah.
So how was your high school? I guess that second high school that you were at for a while. How was that for queer students in general?
It was okay. I know after we got my math teacher that joined the week before um Thanksgiving break, in a way she made it feel a little bit better because she identified as lesbian, so she kind of made some of us feel a little bit safer. And I know they tried to start up a GSA club, but for some reason, uh I want to say that was either my junior year. No, it was my senior year. And even like before COVID hit, for some reason, like they're very weird about clubs. Like they weren't as active as they were. So it was like, oh yeah, these clubs are going on right now, and blah blah's part of them. But we weren't really doing anything. So like we tried, but wasn't successful, unfortunately.
Why do you think it wasn't successful?
I honestly do not know because I know I was in the GSA club and the Latinx club. Even with the Latinx club, it seemed like it wasn't very active that much. I honestly don't know why. I think it's partly because we didn't have like a good way to like kind of like have a group chat one way or another. And like I know we had meetings, but they were like kind of short and all that. And I know at least was someone in the GSA club, it was their parents were strict, so like, oh, I like if we do group chat on like Facebook, I can't really do that because of my parents and stuff like that. So it's also trying to work around that, for example.
Okay. We left off talking about high school. So were any of the classes you took in high school inclusive of queer or trans topics?
No, I don't think we really talked about any queer topics at all. I definitely know we didn't talk about any trans topics, but I very doubt if we did talk about queer topics, it was probably very little.
That's not surprising. Almost every student I talk to who went to a high school in Sacramento says the same thing.
Yeah, the closest thing I really had to that was just having a lesbian math teacher. But I don't at least remember her talking about any like queer case or anything. It's just more like, what are you and your wife doing? And I remember they at least at that point they were looking to possibly adopt. So
Did it feel nice to have a teacher that was open as queer?
yeah, especially because of how like nice and like welcoming she was too. I know she left my school a couple years ago, and I was like, no, how dare you? Even though I already graduated,
Why do you think it felt important to have a teacher that was actually out as queer?
uh, it just gives us all like some form of representation. And actually, now I remember that one of the teachers that quit my junior year, and it took forever to replace him. He was actually out as gay and had a fiance, and he like uh did that when introducing himself because that was his first year at my high school, more like first month it felt like. But I know with one of my friends from that class, she said I think he left is because of like some people not wanting a gay teacher, basically, like some of the parents.
Oh, really?
Yeah, at least that's what she thinks. I can't remember if that was like a rumor or not. I think there are like some rumors about it, but I honestly don't remember them.
Do you know why that math teacher left? I know you're not in that school anymore, but
Um, I I know she like primarily taught in the Bay beforehand, so I don't know if maybe she went back to the Bay or something for whatever reason. I can't remember because she had like a parent school Instagram account that we all followed, and I want to say she posted why she was leaving, but I do not remember right now. She did.
so how did you do in your classes in high school?
I did okay. I was like an average student. I like had A's and B's for the most part. I did well. I was like an average kid.
Did you ever struggle to do well in your classes?
I think there were some classes I did struggle in, but uh I like had help from friends, and I know when I had my math teacher, I was like because before I was like really good at math, but I want to say since the first math teacher like I think it's because the previous math teacher I had my sophomore year, he taught it in a very weird way that like didn't make sense. So when he did out the math, that's when I understood it. But I think because of that, I couldn't really grasp math that well anymore. So sometimes I'll just ask my math teacher for my doing and be like, "Hey, he helped me out on this." So I think that's like why I struggled math and more now than I ever did before.
So why did you choose to go to community? Well, actually, let me back up. Is there anything else you want to say about your high school experience, about being queer, what it was like to be queer at your high school?
No, not really.
Okay. Um, so why did you ultimately decide to go to community college?
So before COVID hit, I toured Monterey State, and I was like, "Oh yeah, I'm gonna go there and my study communications because that's what I was thinking of majoring at the time." And then COVID hit, and I was like, "Okay, it's just gonna be away for 2 weeks, right?" 2 weeks turned into months. So because of that, I was like, I don't know what's gonna happen, and I know like I pretty much knew from the start that if I went there, I was gonna stay on the dorms and on campus. But with COVID happening when it did, I was like, what is campus gonna be like? How was dorm life gonna be like? So was not knowing what was gonna happen and all that, I would say like I'll just stay in Sacramento for a bit longer and just go to ARC.
Do you like being a community college student?
Yeah, it's not too bad. I would say it is probably a little bit easygoing than like a state college or a university to an extent. Like I would say we probably don't have to worry as much about like classes and assignments in a sense as much as like university students do. So,
And what do you dislike most about being a community college student?
uh,
Or is there anything you can think of?
I don't think there's really much I can think of. Like I don't have to pay as much as I would for Sac State. You know, we're gonna go there next fall, but I don't think there's like really too much like cons to it or anything. I know for some people, being close is like or far is an issue, but everybody deals with that no matter what like college they go to.
So this is your third year, right?
Yeah.
Um, why is it that you didn't transfer to Sac State after the first 2 years?
Because when COVID hit, was already knowing that I wasn't didn't learn well online. I just took basically 2 to 3 classes each semester before we went back on campus, just because it's like very it's hard for me to grasp online learning. It's like it doesn't stick as well for me. So that's primarily why. And I don't think I really regret that in a sense, but I also kind of do. Like, I don't regret it because I know my learning style, but then I also do because it's like, oh, everybody else is doing this now and I'm still here, essentially.
Well, it's good to know your learning style and go just a little bit slower if you know you're going to do well, better in your
Yeah.
classes than rush through and potentially not do as well in your classes.
Yeah. I'm happy I like did it in that sense, but it's like everybody's a little bit more ahead somewhat. So that kind of sucks.
So, can you talk some about your experience taking courses while in college that either wholly or in part focus on queer and trans topics?
So I've obviously taken your class Intro to Queer Studies, and I've taken one of your classes, Women's Studies, and now I'm doing public speaking through the Pride Learning, and at least in the public speaking class, we haven't really touched too much on any queer topics. I think the only way we're gonna really is if someone decides to do a speech about it. I know my speech that we have up soon is gonna be uh about a queer figure that I actually learned from your queer studies class. It's gonna be about Albert Cashier. Cashier.
Oh, that short video that I showed. That's a great short
Yeah.
video. um, so why? So you took my women's history class before the queer studies class?
After queer
After.
studies.
Sorry, I'm trying to remember the order of things.
Yeah.
So why did you decide to take that queer studies class?
It actually like seemed like a class where there was like at least before like taking it and like knowing that you're teaching it, but like knowing that there'd be some type of representation one way or another, and like being able to be able to be seen through that. So, and I think especially it was because of like taught by you as a queer person, it made it even better.
So why do you think it's important in general to offer courses that actually focus on queer and trans people's experiences?
It gives us a light because of how like society is so uh heteronormative and like always assuming, oh yeah, like when someone may be trans or gay, just assuming, oh yeah, they're cis and straight, duh.
Do you wish that other classes had? It sounds like there's classes that you took women's history, queer studies, talked about obviously queer topics, but You didn't have any other classes that talked to that included queer topics?
Uh, I kind of had some sort of health class one semester that mentioned like trans people in like different terms, like uh transgender, transvestite, transsexual, crossdresser, and I kind of point out like some of those terms aren't the best to use anymore. And then with other ones, like some of the other ones, like you want to be careful about that. And she was like, "Well, this is like the updated textbook," and I was like, "Well, as a queer person, I'm trying to better educate you because obviously the textbook may be updated and all that, but that doesn't always mean it's going to be the best, essentially."
So, have you had that experience before? Or in addition to that experience, have you had that experience of having to kind of teach the teacher, sort of, so to speak, or teach other students about what it means to be queer or about queerness?
Somewhat, I remember in a early childhood development class, the teacher was talking about how um, when couples find out the sex of their baby, obviously male, female, and I was like, there's intersex people, and I gave her and I told her like some information about how sometimes either through the parents or the doctors, like they will decide on the child's sex. And she's like, "Oh yeah, I know that," and like da 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 da. And it's like, well, if you know that, then why didn't you touch on it?
How does it feel to be in that position where you feel like you have to share that kind of information or inaccurate information is being shared, and then you're in a position to have to provide some to correct the misinformation?
It sucks that it like needs to be done, but then that just means more people know that. Luckily, so it's like a weird position to be in, because especially with having a mom as a teacher and having to help her out with some like technology stuff. It's like I'm really teaching the teacher here.
Um, so, what if faculty, or I guess staying on the curriculum, do you think if you were, I think, would you have liked queer and trans topics to come up more in an accurate way in these other classes you've taken while in community college?
Yeah, so because at least in like they get covered one way or another. It's like better to have that than to have nothing.
So if you were in a class like an English class or whatever, another kind of a humanities or social science class, and queerness was brought up in a way that didn't feel too superficial, what do you think that experience like? How would that make you feel? I guess if you can imagine that that actually happening.
Uh, I would probably like, in a sense, bite back a little bit and just be like, "Oh no, you're conveying this way. It's actually like this,"
Hmm.
or it's like, "No, like you're on the right path, so it's actually this." But like, it depends on what they're saying, obviously. But I would probably just be like, "No, it's this, not that."
And what if you were taking a class and the teacher did a really good job covering queer and trans topics and sort of unexpectedly included queer and trans people's experiences? How would that make you feel?
I would feel seen and be like, uh, they've done the work that I think everybody should do, especially if like assuming that teacher is cis and straight. It's like, okay, you're actually putting in the work.
I ask these questions because through the interviews, it seems pretty clear that queer and trans topics are really not brought up
Yeah.
in 99% or 99.9% of the classes at in the community college system here. Um, and definitely also in high schools, which kind of surprised me, I have to
Yeah.
say.
Unfortunately, I don't know. Maybe it was how certain laws being passed, especially at least within California. I don't know if maybe in the future more kids will learn about more queer and trans topics. I hope so. Or even if not that, like maybe just topics that aren't really talked about, or like actually educating them about history correctly and not being misinformed. Even like something as little as that, I would like to see, even if it doesn't include queer trans topics, like at least teach kids like the right way and what actually happened.
So there was a state law that passed several years ago that said high schools actually have to cover queer history in their classes, but it seems to me there's not that much enforcement.
No.
Anything else you want to say about your experience taking queer inclusive classes? Why it's important, if there are other classes or other topics you'd like to see taught in the classroom related to queerness?
I think it should be more normalized for sure. And like kind of going back to how a teacher that didn't include intersex babies when talking about parents may not touch their babies, that should be a more normalized thing to do. Um, Especially like talking about different gender identities and maybe how some kids will grow up with that and like the concept of gender. I know with some of the sociology classes I've taken, we kind of touched on that a little bit, but not too much. So I think it'll be maybe specific like queer sociology class would be also good, just because of how the field of sociology is. I think it could benefit from that, honestly. Like I don't know what it would essentially cover or like even be called, but I think that could be really beneficial.
Yeah, sure. I mean, like sociology is definitely a discipline, or queerness is a kind of a focus by some sociologists, right? So
Yeah.
there's plenty to draw from within the field of sociology. Um, so have faculty done anything in their classes that have made you feel like you are like particularly included or welcome in the classroom as somebody who's queer and trans?
Uh, to an extent, I would say like a professor like mentioning their pronouns and trying to get everybody to do that, but I feel like that should be normalized. So I would say kind of yes and no for that. I know I've like noticed like with kind of being on Canvas uh from when the pandemic started till now, at least with like ARC specifically, I noticed when I took semester here at Sac City that more people like after pandemic had like kind of gone away, I guess you could say. More people at Sac City were kind of putting their pronouns in their name on Canvas than ARC. I don't know if there's like a certain reason why specifically, but I feel like it should like still be normalized to where people do that.
Why do you think that's important? What would that signal to you?
I would say it would signal that we're at least like in college, especially as like society, that we're more getting used to like people introducing themselves with their pronouns and possibly having they them pronouns be more accepted in a sense by the general public, because obviously not everybody really understands them, and some people like to say, oh no, you're talking about multiple people and you're just one person, why are you doing that? So I think that could also like help a little bit with that as well.
What have your experiences been like being misgendered in the classroom by faculty or other students?
uh I know it's been a little bit awkward, especially if like I had like my full name on Canvas versus like my nickname. It would be like obvious obviously like name doesn't have to equal gender and all that, but it's like I feel like sometimes it should give a little bit of an indication, especially depending on how that student presents himself. Like if I am generally presenting myself in a masked way and my name is very masculine. Wouldn't you think I'm a guy maybe and not a girl?
Have you had the experience of teachers, faculty members, misgendering you, even though you have all of that in the system?
Yeah, I've had one teacher misgender me a couple times when I tried to take a guitar class here. And I know one teacher, uh, I won't say he did this on accidentally, to another student, just because of how he would interact with that student, was knowing how he did. But I noticed one time he accidentally used like she, her for him, and I was like, and I think that's like just purely on accident. I don't think that like meant any harm or anything. But I feel like teachers should be a little bit more conscious about it, even if it's on accident or they don't realize it for whatever reason.
What does it feel like to you when you've had that experience of being misgendered or, seeing other students being misgendered?
It feels weird and like uncomfortable. It's like because like whether uh even like because I know that student, at least I don't remember him having his pronouns in his name, but I know he put it in like his introduction. So I know like at least that, like even with putting your pronouns in your introduction and you don't have your name, I feel like teachers should make like a mental note of that, or just like put it next to the student's name and like keep it pinned somewhere so that they know and like can always think, oh yeah, this student goes by these pronouns.
So you'd like to see faculty put in more effort.
Yeah.
So what kind of effort do you think, like, how do you think faculty can do a better job learning their students' pronouns? You sort of said a little bit just now, but is there, like, in general, what do you think faculty should do?
I think if not all of them have gotten the concept of they them pronouns or even just people using multiple pronouns, they should put in the work for that. And furthermore, just keep in mind that, okay, this student goes by these pronouns, this student goes by those pronouns, so on and so forth. I don't know if that would mean they would have to take like a class or something or go to a seminar. Not sure about that, but even if it's just asking someone they know who has more knowledge about it, even that too would help out tremendously.
Um, so have you had the experience of being in a classroom and being misgendered by a faculty member and that making you feel less maybe invested in the class or less uh, like did that create some distance between you and the faculty member?
Yeah, I felt more or less inclined to go to class, especially like I knows that he was like referring to me like basically in a feminine way, using pronouns, and also with that class, it like kind of took a lot of work for my, not like a whole lot of work, but it took some work for my dad to take me to that class because I primarily take the bus and I was a guitar class, and it's like I don't want to bring my guitar on the bus because just knowing how some people can be on the bus and all that. So I want to have like that safety of like basically someone taking me to class with my guitar. So I like I kind of like told my dad about that, and he's like, "Well, maybe you could do this or that." I was like, "I don't know," and just felt very awkward. Essentially, like knowing I can do certain things to prevent that, but also just felt like, no, I don't think I can. Like not having, uh, like not feeling like I could for whatever reason, or that took a whole lot of work when it really doesn't.
Did you stay in that class?
No.
Did you drop that class in part because of how the professor was misgendering you?
Yeah.
Um, So, what's been your experience on campus? Like, do you feel like what can the campus? So, yeah, what are your experiences with like accessing stuff like bathrooms on campus?
Uh, so with ARC, it hasn't been too bad. I think there should be more of them around campus. And I know with Sac City, it's a little bit harder to find them than ARC. I think like on the Sac City map, it does say where gender neutral bathrooms are, but I think they have it phrased differently. So in a way, it kind of makes it harder to find. And even with that, like if you try to ask me where's like gender neutral bathrooms on Sac City, then where's gender neutral bathrooms on ARC? I like pull up the map for ARC ones, but for this, it's like I don't know. You're gonna have to ask faculty if they even know.
And why do you think it's important to provide more gender neutral or all gender bathrooms?
It could make students feel safe, especially if there is somebody that would, one way or another, attack someone for thinking that they're in the wrong bathroom when they're not.
Have you felt uncomfortable or unsafe using gendered bathrooms in the past?
Yeah, I've definitely felt uncomfortable, especially if like there's even just a couple people in there. It's like it's in ways it's war like internally and externally because you have to like with internally you have to gain that confidence to go to the correct bathroom essentially and then have to possibly deal with someone uh like staring at you saying something or even trying to physically assault you and stuff like that. Like I know one time I used the men's restroom at work and when I was going in, one coworker that he at least he hasn't misgendered me since I got top surgery, but before top surgery he would always misgender me and he was like coming out at the same time. So he just saw me like, oh, okay, you're in here and you're obviously going in here. It's not like a mistake or anything. So I know how that was for him and all that, and I hadn't like heard anything about that, but it just can make it very awkward, especially for moments like that when you know that someone misgenders you while you're going into said bathroom.
Um, Anything else you want to say about bathrooms specifically?
Let people pee. Peace.
It shouldn't be that hard.
Yeah,
So, what do you think campus life is like in general for queer and trans students?
I think it could be a little bit hard to some extent because I know for some people it's easier to find community than others, even if like there's so many flyers posted on campus about GSA. Uh, I think it could be just because of the people that they're surrounded by in their classes and not like having that confidence, even though they probably won't see those people in GSA. It's just, I think it's primarily people saying stuff or doing stuff that creates a not safe environment so that somebody is now worried about possibly just going to GSA.
What about the Pride Center? Have you utilized the services of the Pride Center?
I've gone to the Pride Center a couple times. I haven't really utilized their services, but I've had like positive experiences there. It's really nice. I remember one time I went into there, the United Center was bringing out Peruvian food, and I was like, I'll take some free food. So that was nice.
Oh, you're mentioning food again. I'm hungry.
Yeah.
um, what do you think the college could do to make trans and queer students feel more included on campus in general?
I think a lot of the faculty could put more in work into it and possibly uh go to some seminars or go to some classes about not even just like the usage of pronouns, but just learning how to possibly speak up for a queer student when they feel they don't have the voice to, and maybe even trying to help protect them in some way or another, whether it be they obviously see one instead of theirs like being rude to them about like and basically more or less hate criming them one way or another and doing something about it versus not doing anything about it.
So I think so. How important is community for your own sense of well being at the college? Like, where do you find community, and how important is it to you?
I definitely find community through the clubs. It helps. I think clubs can help everybody make a sense of community one way or another. And with that alone, it could just help your mental state a little bit more than it did before.
What clubs are you involved in?
I'm involved in GSA. I'm in the server for the sociology club, but I haven't really had the time to go there. So I'm say somewhat involved in the sociology club, but I'm a little bit more involved in the GSA club. I haven't been able to go to meetings because of like time and all that, but I've like tried to help out when I can.
I don't think I've asked this question. It's kind of going back in time a little bit,
Hmm.
but when you've struggled in your classes at in community college, why do you think that is? Or I guess the first question should be, have you struggled in your classes?
Hmm.
And then if you have, why have you struggled in your classes?
I've definitely struggled in my classes, and like there's very variety of reasons why. It's because like how they're teaching us, what they are teaching, stuff going on in life and school. There's like so many factors playing into that. It could be multiple things, and it just kind of depends on like the class, the professor, and what's like currently going on. I know there's like a past math class I took. I like the professor was like really nice and all that, but I wasn't really getting the course material or anything. So I haven't really learned much from that class, but like at least like he was like willing to help us out and like you could tell that he's a good professor and also he wants to help us out. Like it's not that, it's just sometimes even struggle with struggling classes because you're not understanding the material for whatever reason. So that could also be another reason why that someone struggles. Now, and I know why I struggled.
And when you have done really well in classes, what do you think was going on that, like, is there anything that the professor did in particular that helped you do well in those classes?
I think kind of like with how the professor is like willing to help us out and like passionate about the class really helps with that because it shows that they care a lot, and especially with like being interested in that particular class that helps even more. I know with being a sociology major, when the sociology professor at ARC, he's like one of the best professors I've had by far, and I like ideally want to take almost any class that he's teaching as long as I can, if I could, forever. He's
Say
like
his name.
uh Nadal Hijati.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, he's a really great professor. I love him.
And what does he do? Like, why do you like him so much?
He teaches sociology. He first at least the class I had with him. The first one was intro to sociology, and I'm taking sociology and the self was him online. Uh, when I had his in person class, he like made it really interesting and would always try to connect with us, and he would always like make jokes. He'd be like, this is my therapy session. Come on, guys. So that like kind of gave more life to him in a sense, at least from a student's perspective. So
So I wanted to respect your time. I definitely could ask more questions, but Is there anything else you want to add or any questions you'd like to return to before we wrap up?
None I can think of.
Not that you can think of?
Yeah.
So, okay, well, thank you.
Okay.